Y'all. Welcome to DistrictCon Day 2. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know that hackers like to party late and wake up early, so 10 a.m. is early enough, right? We're going to get right, we're going to go full steam ahead. I have one announcement, which is that for those of whom don't already know, we have a lovely little badge game that we are all playing. Your NFC tag on the back of your badge, if you scan your phone with it, will take you right to the badge challenge. And top 2 scorers will get tickets to next year. I know that we sold out in 2 minutes, so apparently that's a big deal. We will be announcing the winners of that challenge at closing ceremonies today. So if you sign up with a hacker handle, totally cool. We just won't know who you are unless you come to closing, so please do. We'll also be announcing our junkyard competition winners as well as the winners of Jump the Wall. So it will be a wonderful time. So thank you guys so much for coming again, and really excited to kick off with this incredible keynote. I am so thrilled to introduce General Paul Nakasone. He is now the founding director of the Vanderbilt Institute for National Security, but I'm sure many of you know him as the former head of the NSA, codenamed Dernza. A former commander of Cybercom, US Cyber Command, and he appeared at DEF CON this year and decided to kind of, when he heard of DistrictCon, come and say hello. So please give him a warm DistrictCon welcome. And then this is for you. You'll have to do a double mic, sir.
Excellent, a double mic. Okay, let's begin first of all. If you are with DistrictCon 0, if you've been part of the planning staff, if you've put together any of the work for the past couple of days, would you please stand? I mean, let's review the bidding here. Your first DistrictCon, and suddenly the power goes out. Okay, so if you're in charge of doing something like that, I think we all know that it takes a very special group of people to do that. So for all of you that have brought us together, thank you very, very much. So as Winona said, I'm the director of the Institute of National Security at Vanderbilt University. I brought along a group of my students here that are with us. If you please stand, folks from Vanderbilt. They are the future hackers that are going to keep us safe. And so we're really thrilled to have them with us today. And so if you get an opportunity, just introduce yourselves. They'll want to go ahead and introduce themselves to you as well. Have a seat. That's great. Okay, let me talk a little bit about today. I call my presentation today really a call for action. Let me return to the summer of 2018. I had been in the job just a couple months. And the central question that we were trying to figure out at US Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, is how do we push back against the Russians? How are we going to have an opportunity to ensure that going forward we weren't going to experience the interference and the influence operations that the Russians had conducted in 2016 during our presidential elections? And while they didn't determine, the actual results of that election, we were certainly embarrassed as a nation. And so the answer to that question really came from a young NSA analyst who said, hey, let's take the fight to the Russians. Let's go ahead and deploy a series of 7 to 10 personnel close to Russia at the request of a foreign government and be able to use commercial tools, be able to collect telemetry, look at their architecture, being able to examine malware, and then let's go ahead and share it with the broader public. Now for Cyber Command, this was a huge change in what we had done previously. We were never that transparent. We had never really used commercial tools to the extent that we were going to do it there. And the idea of actually sharing the information with partner nations, with the private sector, and with the world was pretty revolutionary for us at Fort Meade. And so as we took a look at the ability to do hunt forward operations, let's take a look at the impact that we were able to have. So it begins in 2018 with just a simple group of folks, 7 to 10 military and civilian personnel They went forward to a couple countries. Ukraine was one of the first countries we went to. And the idea, again, was to see what the Russians were doing. Capture their tradecraft, capture their malware, and then being able to share it broadly with the commercial sector. And what happens when you share it? Well, suddenly you're able to signature. Once you're able to signature, then you're able to recognize. And once you're able to do that, all the work that they had done on their tools was for naught. And so over a period of 6 years, 85 different missions, 30 plus countries, 80 different networks, we're able to have an impact. And I would tell you, it's just not the numbers. Okay, the numbers are one thing, but what is this able to do in terms of our thinking? First of all was the idea that, hey, we can actually see our adversaries doing things before they do them to us. The next thing was, hey, we're going to see this malware early. We're going to provide early indications and warning to a series of different countries and a series of possible victims that they wouldn't have before. And the third piece is the fact that this was really kind of a piece of deterrence for us. Ability to work with a series of partners, get much better, bring confidence to another nation's networks, and start to have an impact. And so this was for us at Cyber Command and the National Security Agency a huge step forward. This idea of, hey, we're no longer going to take it. We're not going to wait for folks to steal our stuff and try to influence our elections and steal our intellectual property. We're going to be out forward. We're going to actually have a persistent engagement. We're going to be understanding what our adversaries are doing before they do it to ourselves. That's the really good news situation in terms of what we were doing. Let me also talk a little bit more about defense as I see it within the department today. So I know the DoD network pretty well. A huge network, as the slide shows here. Increasingly under attack, scans, and intrusions every single day. Look at the numbers there that we can see with regards to every single day what they face. But I would tell you, it's not only the fact that we're looking at those numbers, but it's broadly in terms of our cyber ecosystem. You know, as we take a look at what's happening today, take a look at the threats here. Take a look at where the tradecraft is moving, and take a look at the challenges we have today with just filling the number of people that we need to operate within this ecosystem today. You know this. You're out there. You're operating every single day there. And so that's why today, as I talk, I call a bit of a call to action. We are finding ourselves increasingly behind. Our adversaries are continuing to be able to broaden the spectrum of what they're able to do to us. And so if we're going to have an impact in the future, if we're going to be able to secure our networks and to secure our intellectual property, the seed corn of what our economy and what our future is, we need to think differently about how we're going to do that. And today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing, not only at Vanderbilt, but broadly in terms of what we need to do collectively to think differently about the problems that we face today. And so as we think about this, I think we have to first of all begin with this idea of, hey, what's the difference in the threats in the environment? What has changed so dramatically over the period of really 5 or 6 years? Since I took over as Derns and Commander U.S. Cyber Command, what's the changes in the threat? What's the changes in the environment? So today as we begin, I think about the threats in the environment in a much different way. If you return to 2018, the threats in the environment, they pale in comparison to what we face today. The number one threat, I would say, in terms of the way I look at what we're facing today, is the impact of nation states against us. And it begins with the People's Liberation Army, the Ministry of State Security, the Chinese Communist Party. Last year we talked about Volt Typhoon, this idea of Chinese hackers embedding themselves deeply within our critical infrastructure and key resources. For what purpose? What purpose? The purpose is to cause havoc, to cause crisis in terms of being able to pick a time and place of their choosing to be able to unleash this against their nation and our lives. So what does that mean? Let me give you a scenario in terms of the way I look at it. Think about an escalating crisis in the South China Sea. As the United States and its allies start to think about how we're going to position ourselves, how we bring forces, how we bring together our command and control, suddenly the lights go out at Joint Base Pearl Harbor. Suddenly the screens of the FAA go blank. Suddenly the capability for us to move our submarine forces from the West Coast are severely impacted by the fact that we can't get out of port. This is the type of work that I think is the outcome of what Volt Typhoon is trying to go ahead and pursue. But we move from Volt Typhoon, this idea of being able to have capabilities within our critical infrastructure, to Salt Typhoon. Salt Typhoon, in terms of, as we think about the past year and what we've learned, an ability for the People's Liberation Army, the Ministry of State Security from China, to embed deeply within our telcos, 9 to date. So what does that mean? That means that every unencrypted text, every unencrypted voice call is suddenly vulnerable. Over the past couple months, we've seen the government talk about this idea of, hey, we need to use end-to-end encryption. Why is that? That's because of Salt Typhoon. So as we think of going forward, think about this in fact of this is truly a capability by the Chinese to gather intelligence. To gather intelligence. To be positioned within our infrastructure. To be able to intercept every call and to be able to understand what's going on. And as the former director of NSA, what do I think about that? What I would tell you, there's several things that I think about. First of all is the fact of this is an incredible scale. A scale upon which you're able to bring artificial intelligence, large language models, to pinpoint, to be able to understand, and to be able to locate a series of different targets that you would like to be able to pursue. But it's also this idea of any prominent person today should understand it's not just the fact that they are targeting them, but also their friends and family. So this idea of your family is now vulnerable in terms of the collection that's being done by a foreign adversary. And it's not just the targeting of people, but it's also the targeting of elements within our government system. The ability to go after justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to understand the cases that are being built today against a series of espionage actors from foreign countries is now all at risk. And so with that begins the idea of how did this happen? How could this actually transpire? And perhaps the most challenging aspect of Salt Typhoon today is this idea that it wasn't sophisticated zero-day capabilities that our adversaries used against us. It was common vulnerabilities. And it took us well over a year to find it. And the depth and the perspective of the breadth of this is still, I think, being identified. This, for me, as I take a look at, the threats today, this is emblematic of what we're facing. And so what we've done in the past isn't going to be able to ensure our security in the future. But it's not just nation-state actors. I would tell you that there's really a new steady state that we're seeing, an ability for adversaries to raise the level of activities within our networks, to bring malware and capabilities that have really shaken the security of what we do within our networks. Ransomware, over 6,000 cases in 2024. That's a 15% increase in terms of what adversaries have been able to do today. $5.2 million is the average payout that most ransomware victims have paid in the past year for an attack. But it's not just the fact that it's been a series of businesses, it's also been our healthcare industry. Over 460 hospitals and healthcare institutions that have been impacted by ransomware. But it's also city and state localities as well. Cleveland and Seattle, days and weeks suffering from ransomware attacks. But from ransomware, I would also tell you that this new steady state has also expanded to, the ability to move rapidly across Patch Tuesday. The vulnerabilities that are identified by Microsoft now have shrunk to 5 days that an adversary normally is able to target a victim. And that's also the impact of ability for our companies to spot and remediate their own challenges within their networks. Last year, on average, about 194 days it takes for a company to find an adversary within their network. Another 68 days on average for them to remediate it. And so from that, I think we can all conclude that this is a new steady state of activity that we're not keeping up with. The fact that we're unable to secure our networks, the fact that we're unable to leverage the software that's being provided today, the fact that we have adversaries that continue to maintain this capability is something that's rising, not shrinking. And I think after years of the exhortations that we've all had about patching and hygiene, we're falling behind. We're falling behind pretty rapidly. And I would offer to you that as we think about that, we have to think differently about the solutions upon which we're going to bring to solve this problem. So if these are the two major areas that I'm concerned about the threat, let's also talk about the environment. Two conflicts that are playing out today that have incredible impact in terms of the innovation that we're seeing within this space. I'll begin with Russia-Ukraine. In 2022, the Ukrainians produced about less than 1 million drones. In 2024, it's upwards of 4 million. The Ukrainians now today are showing us what the future of conflict is going to look like. It's going to look like drones and autonomous weaponry. And we're seeing that today. And as you think about that, you think about the work that's being done in Russia, Ukraine, in terms of being able to have the Ukrainians bring a drone capability to supplement an increasingly challenged number of personnel that can fight this war. But it's not only that, it's also what we're seeing in Israel-Hamas. The innovation and the impact of having supply chain attacks that took place in the fall of 2024 that literally took out the leadership of Lebanese Hezbollah. And so as the former commander of U.S. Cyber Command, what do I think about that? I would tell you, first of all, is that we are starting to see the beginnings of the bleed from the non-kinetic to the kinetic for cyber operations. The fact that we are seeing supply chain operations being utilized to impact a foe. What's next? I think what's next is that we are going to see cyber attacks against a series of platforms, being able to actually down platforms with ones and zeros. The second piece I would offer to you is the idea of we are just today starting to be able to scratch what artificial intelligence and large language models are going to bring to conflict in the future. Think about generative targeting. We're just starting to hear about some of the generative targeting that can be done from a drone platform. The ability to launch that drone, the ability for that drone in the future to be able to choose its targets, the ability for that drone then to be able to weaponize what is actually taking place. We're starting to challenge this idea of humans in the middle of the loop. And I would also offer to you, as we think about artificial intelligence and large language models, think about cyber weaponry. How far are we from agentic malware? This idea of being able to create an agent that's going to move through your network, that's going to change based upon the topology of the network and being able to evade the defenses that are there. Choosing targets of the future. This is where we're headed towards in terms of what AI is going to bring to conflict in the future. But I would also tell you that as powerful as we think about artificial intelligence for the offense, it's equally capable for the defense. We saw that this year in the ability for artificial intelligence and large language models to spot the work that's being done by adversaries to influence elections. We saw that in the fall of 2024, rapidly being able to do that. So the future for us, the future for understanding conflict, this ability to understand how do we bring the power of artificial intelligence and these large language models to the things that we must do to ensure our own security and safety. And I would tell you, that race between offense and defense, that's all going to be about who is able to take the technology and incorporate the quickest into their own models and their own way of being able to secure themselves. So if we talk about the threats in the environment, let's talk about what we need and what we need to do. This summer, I kicked off DEF CON 32. A little bit of an out-of-body experience for the former director of NSA and commander U.S. Cyber Command, particularly as I did my first shot. But you know what I thought after taking that first shot? No, not that I wanted a second. What I thought about is the fact that I missed an opportunity over 6 years, being the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and the director of NSA, to be at a place where talent was. The number one thing that we need for the future is talent. And being able to find that talent, being able to foster that talent, being able to incorporate that talent. Okay, for someone that spent 3 decades of my life in the military, one of the things I would tell you is that being able to spot talent is among the most important things that you do. I ran an agency that had incredible technology, great tradecraft. But what made us different was our talent. And so one of the things I would tell you when Roro and Winona called me and said, hey, would you appear at DistrictCon 0? I couldn't say yes quick enough. Because this is the talent, this is the place that we need to be able to have a discussion on ideas and solutions. We have our own ability to bring talent within the government, but it's not broad enough, it's not deep enough, it's not impactful enough to be able to really address the challenges of today and tomorrow. We've had some really good opportunities and initiatives, but I think we have to think differently about talent. Let me give you an example. Every single year at the National Security Agency, we bring in the top 300 students from across America to be what we call Directors Fellows. We provide an opportunity for them to work tough problems with our best folks, to be mentored, and then we as an agency hire about 70% of them. We need to double or triple that. That's the level of talent that we need. But it's also thinking about talent in a different manner. As I think broadly about our country and broadly about our partnerships, you know, the ability to think, how do we bring talent from the civilian sector in times of crisis or national emergency to bear rapidly against a problem set? We don't have enough people today. We have to think how we bring, I would offer, an auxiliary force to what we need to do in the future in a manner that can help us. And that's part of the reason that I think being able to have a discussion with talent more broadly is one of the most important things that we do. But it's not just talent, I would say, that's really important for us as we think about the future. It's also a series of partnerships. You know, when I started at Cyber Command and NSA, one of the things that I was anxious to do was to outreach to the private sector. One of the things that all of you know is that there are very, very few private sector firms that operate on classified systems. And so I asked our agency in command, how long will it take us to just have a discussion with the private sector? The great answers were, it'll be years, sir. Okay, you have 12 months. And we did it. And we brought together this idea of the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. And Jason Kitka, who's here today, can tell you about under advisement, this ability for U.S. Cyber Command to operate with a series of partners. I mean, this is the way that we think differently about the future. This is being able to incorporate folks that are operating on Slack channels and have an idea of what's going on, to bring their ideas to folks that are watching deep within our enemy's networks to say, hey, are you seeing something different? Is there an anomaly here? Is there something we should be concerned about? This was the beginning of what we needed to do. And as we think about that, it's not only our Cybersecurity Collaboration Center or the Five Eyes or the NATO Cyber Center of Excellence that's depicted here, or Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. It's a series of other partnerships that haven't even been formed yet. But this whole idea begins with a conversation. And it begins with folks that really know what they're doing. You know, the really interesting thing that I think was a point of, I think, really great surprise to the private sector is when they started to talk to under advisement, or they started to talk to the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at NSA, they were talking to experts. It wasn't, oh, let me write this down and I'll call you back. It was, let's have a conversation about what we're seeing. And that's what we need to be able to do with our partnerships. That's essentially the key piece of being able to have exactly how we have impact in the future. But as we think about partnerships, I would also tell you, pragmatic solutions. Okay, those of you that I've worked with before, I think one of the things that you would say is that, Paul Nakasone is not really interested in solutions 5 and 10 years from now. I'd like them next quarter. Okay? And this is what we have to do. And let me give you an example. For those of you that have read the Hacker's Almanac, this is DEF CON 32's Hacker's Almanac that Dark Tangent has kind of illustrated and asked to be put out. One of the areas they cover within there is ransomware. And what do we do with an ability to get after the ransomware problem? And it talks about this idea of, hey, is there a way that we might be able to do things that have an impact against adversaries in the future? That actually has an ability to disrupt what they're doing. And one of the things that's proposed is this idea of, hey, perhaps we could somehow be able to warn victims before it actually happens. That we're seeing something different, or we're able to steal the keys, or we're able to do something that's going to impact the adversary before they actually get going. So at Vanderbilt, at our Wicked Problems Laboratory that we just stood up, we said, hey, most hackers, they want to be able to communicate securely and anonymously. Let's see if we can do that. And so you'll see in that document there on the left-hand side, see something, say something. We provide a series of options upon which we might be able to do this. And this is the idea of being able to take a very, very hard problem, bring together some ideas, and let's test those ideas. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but how about like right now? And that's what we have to do with pragmatic solutions. And today, as we think about some of the things that we've got to do going forward, let's think about how we collaborate to make those pragmatic solutions to our hardest problems perhaps a reality. So what do we need to do going forward? Oh, I get hacked here? Want to check her out, Winona?
I'll do it.
Got to phone a friend here. Oh, fantastic. Free drinks tonight. Okay, I think of it in a series of concentric circles. Okay? And I think about what we have to do is we've got to bring together the private sector, government, and academia. Okay, I didn't say the US government, I said governments. Because it's broader than just the US government. It's broader than just the Five Eyes. It's broader than NATO. It's this idea of, hey, who's operating in a space next to an adversary that knows that adversary well and wants to communicate with us? Then it's also, how do we bring together private sector and individual talent? And the last piece is, how do we really engage academia? Why academia? Because guess what? Unlike governments in the private sector that are operating in a time and space that requires them to move rapidly, there's a little bit of time for academia to think about these things, to be able to bring their research and capabilities to bear, to think about hard problems and offer solutions going to the future. Now, we've had some of the opportunities to have success in this realm. So we take a look at Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or we take a look at the Cybersecurity Center, or we take a look at under advisement, being able to engage a series of different partners has been helpful, but it's not at the scale that we need going forward. So I would just give you the stats for NSA and the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. We've gone from 2 partners to 1,000 partners. We've been able to take protective DNS and provide 2 billion different warnings in terms of some of the challenges out there. 100 different private sector advertisements that go out there, providing a series of different capabilities to the private sector, whether or not scanning, protective DNS, or secure email. That raises the bar in terms of what's going on. But it's not enough. It's not enough. And so our abilities to go forward, my sense, are really dependent upon 3 things. This idea of, first of all, we've got to have a broader sector of private sector partners. How do we bring together the private sector entities and have a discussion with a series of different governments? And then how do we bring academia into this? Sharing intelligence, sharing threat information, being able to incorporate the best solutions. And then finally, how do we work side by side? Guess what? Here's what I learned over my 6 years leading NSA and Cyber Command. It's one thing to be virtual in collaboration. It's another thing when you're standing side by side, someone that has the authorities, the knowledge, and the capabilities to bring to bear what needs to be done. And that's where we need to go, folks. And so as we think today, I would tell you with this call to action, we need your ideas. And we need the way that you can think differently about it. And we want to be able to incorporate some of the things that you're seeing out there. So what better place to be today than DistrictCon? DistrictCon 0 to have that discussion. And so with that, thanks a lot for your attention. I look forward to any questions you might have. Winona.
All right, gang. Flying in a streaming mic for me. Thank you. For those of whom have not yet sent in questions, and those of whom on the live stream, feel free to continue sending them. They keep coming in. It's less for a. It's to make sure that we can all. Oh, is this also out? Gang, we're killing it today. Check. All right.
He's got
Well,
some bits.
Check. Okay, wonderful. Okay, please feel free to keep sending your questions to nationalsecurity@vanderbilt.edu. They're coming in now. So actually, this one's kind of spicy, General, just to start you off.
Spicy.
Yes.
Is that a technical term we use here at DistrictCon?
Yeah, that's a technical term. A lot of news in the last 24 hours has been about the firing of high-ranking military officers, to include the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. How concerned are you about this?
So I know General C.Q. Brown really well. I had the privilege of serving with him for over 10 years. He is an outstanding leader and someone I really I respect greatly. He's the principal military advisor to the president. Let me just share with you that at the end of the day, the president gets to choose whose principal military advisor is. So the president has chosen someone different to move forward, and so I think we go from there. And I know that General Brown will be incredibly capable in the future as a private citizen and veteran.
Thank you, sir. How about, what advice do you have for a young person, especially given the HackerCon, pursuing a job in national security?
Always worry about the power.
Well, fair.
So these are tough times right now, right? I mean, we are looking at a move towards efficiencies within our government. I think there's a number of folks that are wondering if they're going to have a job tomorrow. Hey, part of it is that having a degree of resiliency, right? And being able to look past maybe the next 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. My own experience is that for someone that thought the first 4 years of my life after I left college was going to be just the way I planned it, let me offer just an idea that perhaps it won't be. So I think the first thing is resiliency. But here's the second thing. For the talents that you have tremendous opportunities. One of the things that attracted me to Vanderbilt University was the ability to think differently about how we bring people into service. I'm a big believer in service, and so I'm hopeful that many of you will consider points in time to have that service. ROWA, we're known, and they all exemplify this idea of service, and I think that that's really an important piece. I think resiliency and service are two things that I would offer.
That's helpful and I'm touched. Thank you. Well, actually, that brings us to the next question. When we're a bunch of hackers at a hacker conference, how do we interact with a place like Vanderbilt, like the Wicked Hackers Lab? If you want Wicked Problems Lab, if you want us to participate, how do we do it?
So first of all, I think you meet our folks. You come up and say, "Hey, I'm Durns Paul, and I've got an idea in terms of how to solve the problems that are out there. Come talk to us." You have our contact information there. We are anxious to engage with you. And I would tell you that just as I was talking about see something, say something with regards to ransomware, think about the problems that you're considering right now and the areas that you may have ideas for. Let us explore them with you. Again, one of the neat things about being in academia is you have a little bit more time than being in the private sector or being in government. So we're anxious to hear that. But most important, let's have the dialogue. Let's start with a dialogue. I'm here today to have that dialogue. And so it's great to have you here as well.
Awesome. All right. Oh, now we're back to the spicy questions again. Are we being held up or restricted by the lack of sharing and cooperation within the intelligence services and the reluctance culturally to cooperate with us commercial entities more than we have?
So I think that we have a long ways to go, right? The government, I think we've got to think differently about how we're going to share. If I might just offer a story. In the fall of 2022, we thought differently about how we're going to share our most sensitive intelligence about Russian plans against Ukraine. And the ability to release that information, some of our most sensitive intelligence, built a coalition, I think disrupted an adversary, and ensured, really truth being told. And so I think that's the same thing that we've got to use as an example to how we're going to do it in the future. So the things that you're seeing, the things that we're seeing, we should have a conversation about that. You can well imagine that there's always a balance between security and privacy. And one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that we get that balance exactly right.
Okay. What advantages and disadvantages is America coming into the next decade with regards to cyber and AI? And same question for some of our biggest adversaries and competitors. You mentioned the PLA, the MSS.
Yeah, so let's begin with, we're an innovation nation, right? Let's take a look at anything that's been done. I'm old enough to remember 2007 when Steve Jobs actually stood up and says, hey, I'm going to reinvent the cell phone at Macworld. I was like, reinvent the cell phone? I like my BlackBerry. What the hell are you going to do with a cell phone? Right? And so just think about the impact that disruptive technology had in 2007. 44 different models of the iPhone. Think about the industries that have been built off it. Think about the ways that we've been able to communicate and be able to share information and be able to transform our society. Guess what? That's what artificial intelligence is going to do to us in the future. We can see it already. But as we think about that, how do we ensure that that's going to be done for good? That we're going to be able to leverage that capability? That we're going to be able to build a series of industries that really are impactful for democratic nations and our partners throughout the world, and not be used to spy on us, or not be used to track us, or not be used to develop the next generation of cyber weaponry. So we've got to think differently about the way that we're an innovation nation. And I would tell you, it won't be the fact that we're innovating so quickly. It's going to be who are the folks and who are the people that bring this innovation quickly to bear, right? Quickly to bear. And so as I talked about, this innovation within the confines of Russia, Ukraine today with autonomous, platforms and drones, guess what? They're bringing it indigenously, rapidly to bear on what they're doing. We've got to think about that for AI as well. And the challenges, hey, guess what? The same disruptive technologies that we're going to be able to utilize for our future to build our economy and to better ourselves can also be used by autocratic nations against their people and against their adversaries. If you take a look at the way that there is scoring today in the People's Republic of China against their citizenry, this is like an Orwellian approach to what we see. We don't want that within democratic nations in the future, and so we've got to be the ones that think differently about this and how do we do this safely and securely.
Well, then let's talk about some of these democratic nations, right? Anyone who watches the news knows that America's transatlantic relationships are changing. And the post-World War II world order we're familiar with is changing. So how does that affect our readiness and us strategically with regards to cyber and AI?
I don't think anyone would be surprised that I'm a big believer in bringing partners to bear into what we're doing. I think bringing partners to bear means you have to be able to be inclusive with them. Whether or not it's a transatlantic partnership, but it's also a trans-Pacific partnership as well. How do we bring a series of different nations that really understand the Pacific much closer to us than they have in the past? And so I think that's really important for us. We, as we think about the future, we are going to be able to have, our safety and security tied to not only what we're doing, but what we do with a series of partner nations. And so I'm a firm believer in being able to continue to foster those partnerships, whether or not they're in Europe or whether or not they're in Pacific or whether or not in South America. This is one of the things that I think is an advantage of the United States, and we shouldn't lose that advantage.
Okay. Back to domestic. How do we have a realistic conversation with those in the defense industries that not all government actors are bad? Post-Snowden disclosures, there's still a lot of work to be done there. And to a degree, their actions harm offensive operations of places like CyberCon.
So I can speak from my experiences. I guess one of the things that I learned pretty quickly in the job is perhaps the most important thing that I was going to do as Commander U.S. Cyber Command and the Director of NSA was ensure that there's trust and confidence of the American people in what we did. Part of that's being transparent. The fact that I didn't make it to DEF CON when I was the director of NSA or commander U.S. Cyber Command, bad on me. Bad on me. You have to engage. You have to be transparent. You have to be able to engage in these discussions. People have to have the confidence that, hey, I may not necessarily agree with everything Paul Nakasone says, but at least I trust him that he's going to follow the laws of what we do in our nation, and that he is answerable to those that oversee him, right? And I think that is among the most important things that leaders in our government have to be able to do. They've got to be able to create that trust and confidence.
Yeah, certainly. And actually, speaking of your time as DERNZA, what was the biggest area of change that you viewed while you were DERNZA and commander of U.S. Cyber Command?
I think there's two parts of that. Let me just start with the first part. I talked a little bit about the threat and the environment. For those of you that remember 2018, it's nothing like 2025. I mean, the things that we were thinking about 2018, about the Nigerian prince that was trying to, get my money, okay, I don't think about that anymore. And that's a little bit of humor in terms of, the threat. But let's be honest. I mean, the threats that we see today, they pale in comparison. I mean, it's so dramatically different. And I think the other piece of that is the sense of time. How many things happen within the day, and how many things happen within the month. I recall when I was leaving Command and NSA that it seemed like the clock never stopped, that the clock was continuously running, and that there were always activities every single day that was going to require something. I think that's the future that we live today. And so being able to think in time and space is much different. But here's the other thing. I think that we as the government clearly understand that we don't have all the answers, particularly in cybersecurity. And if we can't engage with a series of partners, bad on us. And that, I think, hopefully was one of the things that we were able to do at Cyber Command and NSA, was to broaden our base of let's engage with the private sector. Let's share our information with them. Let's be able to understand what they're seeing. Let's make sure we talk with them to tell them what we're seeing as well. And I think that that's a tremendous difference.
Thank you. This one is a little bit in the weeds. You mentioned that we are challenging the idea of humans in the loop on AI decision making. What does that mean in terms of DoD Directive 3000.09? That weapon systems have to have appropriate levels of human judgment in exercising the use of force. Is a lawyer here?
So here's what I would say. What I was trying to point out is the fact that the environment is moving so quickly that some of the things that we had said previously with regards to there will always be a human in the loop, I think they're going to be challenged in the future. I mean, I just think that our adversaries are not going to have the same type of restrictions on them, and we're going to have to think, are there certain things that we are going to be confident about that AI will be able to do for us that, aren't necessarily being done today. I'm not saying that I'm challenging the idea. I'm just saying that, hey, the environment's moving pretty quickly here, and we say these things today. We may be able to think differently about them in the future. So.
All right, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative with the last question here. Sir, we are in a huge international community of hackers. And what would you say to not just the people at DistrictCon, but the people that will interact with these attendees in future cons? And how do we galvanize them on top of other people in this room?
So galvanize them with really hard problems. I mean, this is the one thing that I'm always just receptive to, is that this is a place that's thinking differently about how we challenge ourselves to be able to solve really difficult problems. And so let's do that. Let's think about solving the problems that's so impactful for us today in a manner that we hadn't thought about previously. That's what I find so refreshing about DistrictCon and DEF CON and other places that have brought hackers together. Okay, let's get after these things. Let's not wait 5 and 10 years. Let's do it together. Hey folks, on behalf of myself and everyone that I brought from Nashville, thanks a lot for your warm welcome. Have a great DistrictCon 0.